are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been loathed with friends. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. To keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Thank you so much for joining me. We are at Toward Anarchy on the social media, wherever it is, and wherever you find me, wherever you listen to the show today, click, tap, or smash that like button, whatever you have to do to get it to respond to you. Do it now. It's the biggest, easiest, simplest way to support me. And of course, you can always visit me. If you're ever in Topeka, Kansas, come visit the comic book shop, Amazing Fantasies here. And as always, everything that we do starts at towardanarchy.com. You can find me there, and you can find me at Toward Anarchy on the social media, the Facebook and the X and the Instagram, and I think that's about it. I don't know if I have any more or not. I may be in a whole bunch of places that I don't know about, but those are the ones I officially recognize. And if you go to towardanarchy.com and you look for episode 2615, you will be right on board with me, and there'll be some links there and things. If you're interested in my author, you'll be able to get to her website from there, and I'm excited. This was really cool. This is one of these conversations I jumped into really, really quickly. You know that I'm on the Podmatch system. I talk about it. Any number of the people that we interview here are found on Podmatch, and it's just been really something I've been happy to be a part of all this time. And I just come across these amazing people, and they will send me a little contact information, and they'll talk about their things and what they're doing. And sometimes it just blows my mind what they're up to. And sometimes you're like, okay, yeah, let's have that conversation now. Let's not wait. And when Michelle Stiles reached out to me, that was my first thought. Let's talk about this. Let me give you an idea. So she's an author, right? This is the book that got my attention. I haven't read it yet. You guys know that happens often, that I haven't read the books when I talk to the people. One Idea to Rule Them All, Reverse Engineering America Propaganda, book one of a trilogy. Now, this is obviously, this is right up my alley, right? So as soon as I saw that, I said, yes, let's have this conversation with Michelle. Smartsheep.com. It's SMARTSHEEPE.com. If you like what you hear and you want to know more about Michelle, that is her website, and of course that'll be at towardanarchy.com. It's episode 2615. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me. We had some technical issues trying to get connected, but I think we're rolling now, so I'm really excited to get a chance to talk to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's fate. We got through the technology, right? And so I'm supposed to be here, and we're going to have a great talk. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. That's obviously you've done some other things, and let me mention some of those. You are an author, and this is quite the title here. Fast Track Your Recovery from a Total Knee Replacement, How to Eliminate Pain and Pain Medicine the Quickest Way Possible. That's just one title. And then also Color and Laugh Your Way to Knee Replacement Recovery. So I'm guessing you know something about knee replacement. Why don't you give me the brief on that?
Well, my background is physical therapy, so I worked with a really good group in Virginia, and we were just cranking them out, and learned a lot of things from the surgeon himself. He was a great guy. I don't think they make those kind of guys anymore, real paternalistic in terms of his outcomes. And anyway, so I just put this little book up, and it's done remarkably well it's got to be over 10 years now. And then the coloring book is just based on my Irish humor. And, you see things up close, and you can poke a little fun at them. And so people really like it as a gift item. You know what I mean? Instead of giving somebody chocolate or flowers or something, they have a friend that's had a knee replacement, and so they just give them this coloring book so they can have a smile on their face while they're eliminating pain with my other book.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's a great thing. There are some still out there. There are a few. Yeah. There are some. A lot of the doctors with the Free Market Medical Association. I have a regular conversation with a man named Dr. Dean Lloyd. And while he is not a surgeon, he's a homeopath and allopath. But he's his attention, and I think a lot of their attention now is toward sort of individual care, turning away from this medical system and the troubles from it. I mean, and not just because it has troubles, because it itself is troubling. So yeah, it's really great when you can introduce people to ideas like that. That's really cool. And so not a personal thing though. You didn't have to go through the pain yourself. It's just all the experience you had with other people going through it. Well, that's that's one of the. I remember. What is it? The cover of an album from the late '90s, mid-late '90s. I can't think of who it is, but it's a knee surgery. It just that's the cover of the album. It just shows the sort of brace holding the knee and then split open, and that's an album cover. Metalheads. So how do you go from being a physical therapist? Yeah, right. Go ahead. You already know.
Bring it on.
Tell me.
No, it's it's not sort of a progression, but yet I'm just a secret truth that, many people out here, right, asking questions and seeing the political things. But I started this around 2008. I saw, Barack Obama rising, and I thought, in any real world regardless of what his skin color is or whatever, I go, well, you should have more. If you're going to be quote unquote leader of the free world, you should have more experience, right? He was a junior senator, right? And it just seemed like, wait a minute, are we just putting these people in as sock puppets? And I've never been a political person. I'd never really wanted to watch politics, and maybe I was sleeping in social studies class. I don't know. But that just kind of struck me, along with seeing some a power grab locally in my area. And it was like, wow, if it's this evil here, you know what I mean? Like, if there's a power grab for such a small anthill, what is it in Washington, right? I can't, because they go to the biggest hill first, right? The power, goes upstream. And so anyways, I just, you know what, I am gonna start researching propaganda. And so maybe it's a divine inspiration, I don't know. But so I just started reading, and I went to Creel, I went to Bernays, Lippmann. That was right around, World War. And of course, Creel is the head of the Committee on Public Information, right? And he wrote How We Advertised America. Are you familiar with that book? Yeah. Okay. So he's just doing a victory lap, right? And it just smacks you in the face. He goes, oh, so the greatest sales job in the entire world. He says that, you know what I mean? I'm paraphrasing, but in other words, he's, you think, wait a minute, shouldn't you either have good reasons for going to war or not? Right. And, selling a war just really seems offensive. And, I'm reading this and then I'm, of course, reading Bernays and Lippmann alongside of it. But then Lippmann is totally trashing democracy. It can't work. People are too stupid. You know what I mean? They can't possibly know enough about the complex environment that we live in. And so, we need to manage the news for the people so they can make sense of it, right? That's kind of the argument he's making in public opinion. And so, all three of those things, I just started talking to people and I go, do you know this? Did you know that we censored people in World War I? I hadn't, I was just waking up to our own history. And I thought it was profoundly interesting and that it made sense to sort of track it. And, my efficacy for writing a book like that was fairly low. And whoever said, anything doing is worth doing poorly was a genius. Okay. Because the first book I wrote in 2018 was like, oh, goes okay, And it was the bones of it. And I thought, well, at least, like maybe moms and stuff, homeschoolers could use it to teach this as a framework for their kids. Because really, we don't even teach this at all. And our own history. Now they teach the fallacies as a antidote to propaganda, which is utterly useless because it's not reason that they're speaking to, right? They're bypassing reason. And anyway, so I thought, well, and then between 2018 and 2020, when the COVID hit, I realized between then, a lot of the flesh started filling in on the book. Right. I go, well, I got to add that story and this. So it rounded out to be a fairly decent book. And I thought, well, I got to write this. And I'm working and doing it, on part time. And then, how some things happen. My mom passed away in 22. And it was one of those things like, I'm doing it, finishing it, getting it out. And I did get it out in the fall of that year. And so that was kind of the genesis of the first book. And, things just as I see them and I study them, I've just gone way deep in a lot of the books around the turn of the century. The next book is called Masters of Illusion, The Rise of Corporate Social Control. So that's going to take us back into the 1800s and follow a number of different paths. So anyways, that's how my synthesis has been in terms of following, pulling on strings, Michael, pulling on strings. That's all it is, saying like, wait a minute, what is this? I got to know deeper. And then, because it's insane out there. It's crazy, right? Your audience knows that. It's nuts. Trying to parse that together, right? And if you go back in history, it becomes, you see patterns and principles, you see economic power, you see the rise of just the communications reach. Right? Like the penny press was huge. In 1833, rural communities were pretty much isolated, right? They didn't, guy rides through and everybody goes, oh, the news, and runs out to greet them. But pretty much they're isolated and self-containing. And that means they're conservative, right? Because indigenous people, tribal people, they tend to remain the same for considerable length of time. When you start to have outside influences, it starts to crack that walnut. And the penny press was, press in general, the newspaper was 6 cents a page up until the penny press, which of course put it down to 1 cent a day. And every man could buy that then. And so all of a sudden, the reach extends in the cities. And at the same time, the railroads are crisscrossing the United States. And so now, boom, these major dailies are going all across the U.S. And they're being picked up by Mr. Everyman. And so that starts the rise of advertising and commercial society. And so, and that reach is profound because before that, if I speak, it's people in the sound of my voice, you know what I mean, that can hear me and be influenced. Or maybe a small town newspaper, okay, cities, we're doing it, but now we're talking nationwide, right? And then magazines come along, late 1800s, that's reaching a different audience. So it's so those kinds of things, stacking those together, right? I mentioned history, I mentioned economics, I mentioned the communication structure, the relational piece, which everyone picks up as propaganda, right? How language influences you. That's relational, how I can manipulate you, okay? And then the final piece of that framework is the selling machine that they created, okay? And it's different. It's how you put all these pieces together to manipulate opinion and control society. And they were putting really unique things together at the turn of the century that I track in my second book. So anyways, I'll shut up and let you get.
Well, basically, you're saying they've been at it for a long time, and they do a pretty good job of it. They know what they're doing. So if you're surprised today that there's a fog of war or a lack of understanding with a general, we'll not even call him an idiot, just the average person, it's no wonder why, because they've spent a great deal of time putting themselves in a position to be able to control this information and the flow of this information. And it was still kind of a wild space, a Wild West space, even into when I first started in communications, because it wasn't centralized yet. It was just getting to the point where the mega corporations, the mega communications corporations were starting to buy everything up. Every little station around the nation, they were all Cumulus or something. You know, so everybody owned them. And that was only just beginning. They were only just starting to consolidate, and it would be another 2 or 3 years before they actually came in and took control of the radio stations and the television stations by installing the emergency alert system. Before that, it was the emergency broadcast system. It was all it was compulsory, but you just complied with it. You just did it when they aired. You flipped the switch on and let them air their emergency information. Whereas this changed everything. It was actual electronics in the studio that took over the airwaves and broadcast whatever they wanted to broadcast. So even in my time, it's not been complete, but it has been completed in my time. There's no bit of information that they can't control. Whether they do choose to or not is a different story. But but this ends up bringing up a really central, important point in the idea of free speech, right? Because if I have like reach costs money. Okay. If I want to advertise in a newspaper, right? If I want to own a newspaper, if I want to buy social media now, if I want to, you have to, if I want to put up a website, but you have to market it, right? It just doesn't get traffic for free. And same thing with radio, a platform, and TV. And so you like, they don't mind if minor voices, because you can't pick up a big enough following. And if they don't, it's like a bazooka on the hill. You know what I mean? Like if they don't want you on that stage, they can invite you up or they can keep you out. And if you do manage to scrabble your way up to the base of the stage and you're trying to make you know what I mean? They can just train negativity on you, right? They did that at the early turn of the century with the real reformers like Bob La Follette from Wisconsin. And I mean, he was an anarchist, he was a radical, he was a socialist, and they do the same thing now. I mean, they have their pet names that they demonize people, and they're not to be listened to. They're the unsophisticated of society, and you don't have to hear them, actually. So, you go, well, when that disparity, that power disparity in reach comes into play, you and me, like you can have a free, we have a piece of paper that says we have free speech, but we don't have equal speech. I mean, and then add front groups to that, right? Michael, add front groups, where they just, buy an organization and put it out there and it looks neutral, but the money behind it is totally something else, right? The national, they called it the National Citizens League for the Promotion of Sound Banking. Have you heard of that? No, no, most people haven't, but that was one of the things that the bankers used to sell the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. And they did it. They started it in 1911. And they basically said, no one's going to listen to us because we're hated. Wall Street was hated at that point and very, they weren't trusted. And so they said, but they still trust Midwestern bankers. So they made this group that only Midwestern bankers, and they put like $500,000 in it, but of course it was funded by Wall Street, and they spread the gospel, and they used that word, the gospel of sound banking. So, I mean, and again, that's expensive speech that looks neutral, right? It looks like the self-interest is wiped away off of there, right? And so, but it ends up influencing a lot of people because they think it's okay, right? They think it's coming from a neutral, unbiased source. Is that noise? Can you hear that? Yeah, there was something there, huh?
It was my AC kicking on. Do you want me to turn it on?
What an abs, nothing. No.
Can you cut it out?
I thought maybe it was something on the other side of my door, but no, it's fine.
No. Okay.
It didn't. It was no biggie. I just heard it was all.
Okay.
And I'm just hyper aware of everything that's going on around me anyway because it's so quiet. Yeah, no problem. Wow. there's a lot here, because that control of information is key to everything that they're able to do, and we're experiencing it right now. It's been a very interesting thing to see. This is the first time that America has got to deal with a lot of this, like the drones, the small drones. Obviously, we've had the big weapons of war drones for some time now, but the smaller drones, this is the first time that we've got into combat and been involved with that happening, and so there's something interesting going on there, because part of the problem with the drones is that they're not like they're not like giant military aircraft or boats that you see sort of flying overhead, or troops that you see coming at you wearing an American flag. They can have any flag on them. You don't know where they're coming from. They can be used against us. They can be used by us against us. They can be used by individuals. A guy with a backpack can fill a backpack full of these things, and I mean, take out an entire building, entire neighborhood, entire city with the thing, depending on how weaponized the things are and how controlled they are. They've been trying to build our own troops to be able to do these sorts of things with these types of weapons for years. And the fog of war that surrounds everything, the fog of war is already a real thing, but now we have this sort of fog of war with controlled information and total controlled information. There's nothing left anymore. If you are just a normal person and you don't understand that there are other resources for information, and you get your information from CNN, Fox, name them, MSN, it doesn't matter. If you're getting your information from mainstream, even PBS, mainstream radio or television, you have no clue what's going on in the world. You are completely I believe those people probably have a hard time putting their shoes on every day, because they're completely. How would they understand the world? When I go to look at the news, I'll give you an example, because all I do is I try to stay, because of the algorithm, right? It's almost impossible to get information without the algorithm interfering with it. And you manipulate the algorithm every time you give a like or a dislike or something. And so I just try to stay dispassionate from it. Here's the places that I want to see information from, all these different places around the world. I'll stay away from the likes and the dislikes so that it just keeps giving me what it thinks it wants to give me, not what I think I want it to give me. And so I try to imagine looking at the world through the eyes of one sort of left-leaning person or right-leaning person, to see what they're seeing, and then notice what the other one isn't seeing, and imagine, because I will see the same headline, the same story used by the right or the left completely differently. The same language, the same numbers, the same thing they're talking about, but one just gives an opinion that it's a bad thing, the other just gives an opinion that it's a good thing, and nobody really talks about why it exists at all or why we even have to have this thing.
Yeah. It's almost like, too, though, I think some of them are similarly worded, but then there's others that almost like the facts are different, right? Like, remember when Dodge was happening, and it was like they're accessing the database over here and they're not accessing the database over here. Of course they're not. And then, of course they are, right? And who knew, right? Who could tell, really? So it becomes, I like to, here's another thing that's an issue is, right, it was 96 that Fox News was created. Okay, and so before then, we had everybody essentially drinking from the same stream, right? So they go to mainstream media for most of their news, and it's tacking leftward, okay, for a while. And so the right is getting disaffected, saying, well, it's not addressing our issues, leading to the perfect scenario where Fox News kind of breaks off from the mainstream, right? Now you have two streams, right? And they've just allowed those two streams to keep getting like this. And so now the distance is this far, and it's like, I call it the bifurcation of the American mind, right? I mean, now you have and of course the Civil War idea, right? And you have people that are in the same family that can't sit down at Thanksgiving and have a conversation because it's like, well, you get your facts over here or your ideas, we get our facts over here, and they're like, we can't even talk to each other anymore. And so it's, I think it's intentional. I think they knew exactly what they were doing, driving that wedge into the culture where, if you can't agree on the basic facts of what's happening in the country, right, you're not going to be able to, you can't be united, right? It's difficult.
Well, it creates two states. It creates a state of unknowing, which creates a state of fear, or it creates a state of fear. Either one. But they both end up in the same place, and you have people who are paralyzed, unable to do anything, because that's the one thing they always leave out about the human response. They say fight or flight, but the actual thing that most do is freeze. And that's what most people have done. They're frozen in their lives. They're frozen in this division, and they have no way. Yeah. They have no concept of even how to get out of it because they don't really have a concept of what their life could be like without it. They don't understand that they are controlled and that everything about that their reality is contrived and that it's completely different when you step outside of it.
Yeah, I mean, right, so you got the left going, it's the right-wing, neo-Nazi, fascist, bigots, and then the right is pointing back the cultural Marxist, deviants, whatever, whatever they want to point at. And it's like, okay, so those two are the enemies, but, and then the real thief is, getting away with murder, not being, it doesn't have the enemy planted on his head, right? And so these two are almost at war with each other, and yeah, we're in trouble, and it's really hard to talk to people. I just, for the most part, I really gravitate toward people who are questioning. They see the noise, they see the hatefulness, really, especially since COVID, right? That really drove the wedge there, and it's not getting any better. And so if they're disaffected with that, I can have a conversation with them. But if they're just spewing talking points from either side, I just there's more to it. You really got to look at history and move on, because they're just, until something happens in their frame of the world. For me, something doesn't fit in the little frame that I have about the world, and I need to ask more questions because how I've been looking at things is not right anymore. And until somebody comes to that conclusion, it's pretty hard to have a dialogue with them.
Well, that's that Overton window view, right? It's controlled for them. That's the thing about it. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of the Overton window is that this is it for most people these days. It's this thing right here. And while this is just as good as any technology or just as bad as any technology, the fact is it's used against us. It's weaponized against us. All this information and these tools are weaponized against us. Everything is turned into an opportunity to either create dollars for somebody or to create votes for somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's any wonder that it continues to even happen. It's real weird because we have these things that happen throughout society, pop culture events and things like that, or world events that will bring attention, and people they'll get a sense of clarity for this very short period of time. Unfortunately, I think it's like 45 minutes, and I'm kind of serious about that. It's about the length of a sort of average comedy show. Right, because if you look at pop culture in particular, comedy, you look at somebody like George Carlin or any number of people in and around that sort of conversation that was being had 50 years ago, or even before that. It seems like everybody's paying attention, but they're only paying attention for the 45 minutes that the show is being put on. After that, they forget what it was all about. They forget the important part. All they remember was the F-bombs and the curse words that you can't say on television. That's what they remember. They don't remember the important parts about it's a gang and you're not in it. It's a club and you're not invited, and all the things like that. Those things, everybody cheers those ideas Another example is the Star Wars, the rebellion against the corrupt criminal system, and everybody cheers them in the movie, but then they go back to supporting the corrupt criminal system as if it doesn't mirror it, as if it's not art imitating life and telling you, yoo-hoo, we're not talking about the British Empire over here, we're talking about what's going on today.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to break through, right? I mean, it's the education system. People don't read. They can't follow arguments for a considerable length of time. I was kind of horrified to see that they're really not making kids read full-length books. They are giving them like book portions, and it's not good. It's something that parents have to do something about. They can't expect the system to correct itself, because they want us to be soundbite driven. They want us like monkeys trained. It's like social media is like brain crack. You know what I mean? Here's a cute little monkey. Oh, here. And, before you know it, half an hour of your life that you can never get back has been spent just scrolling some mindless, idiotic thing that they have the algorithm for, right? And
it's
so
only half an hour. I see people burning off time.
Yeah.
Just going. And that's not to say that it's necessarily all bad, but it's the constant distraction. It's the totality of the distraction, not the individual distractions themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm like really anti text message. I don't want people to. I don't give people the ability to just knock me on the shoulder at any time and say, I want an answer. Like, it's so distracting,
I've been trying
especially when you get older and you have to have readers.
Yeah, right. And they're not as easy.
And you have to go, I can't see. And you know what I mean? And it's like, look, email me. Like, there isn't most things that a friend can't just email you and that I can respond to later. You don't need an immediate answer, and it causes all kinds of friction with people. Why didn't you answer me back? Well, you know what I mean? I was busy. I have a life. I'm not.
Yeah, I make it real clear these days anymore to anyone and everyone, and here in front of this audience as well, across the network, everyone. My phone doesn't beckon me.
Yeah.
The notifications, none of that. No program tells me it's time to check. It doesn't tell me I just got a new text from so-and-so. It doesn't tell me that somebody liked my post on Facebook or Instagram. None of that. And I'm actually somebody who uses those things in a way to market myself. But I don't let this thing control me.
Yeah.
It's bad enough that I go and browse it when I browse it. I will not have it tell me that it's time to start browsing. Not even my favorite video game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Oh, it's just one of those simple little things that you can do to try to set yourself free from unnecessary things tying you down, always trying to get your attention away from whatever it is that you're doing. There's no reason for it. There's no need for it. There's nothing coming through this that isn't somebody trying to call me an emergency that I'm going to answer, because that's what the thing is for, that I need to respond to. If you felt that it was good enough to send me a text in a nice casual text conversation, then you should feel that you can wait for a while for me to respond.
Yeah. We've just, it's hard to imagine that these really have only really been around since the turn of the century.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Not
it
even
feels like we've lived with
these things like this.
2007. Okay, yeah. No, it's hard to believe that we grew up without them. I mean, I go back and I think of that. I'd go back to that any day myself. You know what I mean? Even with
I wouldn't miss it. I don't think I would. I don't know why I would, because it doesn't dictate my life. So many other people do, though. Someone wouldn't give it up, right? Offer them the $1 million to give it up for 5 days or something like that, and they couldn't do it. You just leave it right in front of them, leave the text on, all the notifications on, until you can't touch it, can't move. You can eat, you can get up and go to the bathroom, but that phone's going to be sitting there beckoning you the whole time.
Yeah. So, I mean, So, here's like going back to what we were talking about a little earlier with the facts versus, like I read Le Bon, which I'm sure the crowd, A Study of the Popular Mind, about Gustave Le Bon. He's a Frenchman who wrote that book at the turn of the 1900s, or going into, and so, anyways, he basically says, we're not using facts and reason, okay? And this is really important for your audience to remember. And I created something that I call the infrastructure of belief. And it's a way to kind of shortcut. It's hackable humans, right? How can we get you to do what we want you to do? And it's just if you think of a number 5 dice, okay? You have experience in the middle. You have authority at one bottom, social pressure at the other, okay, culture and language up at the top, all right, and they're like knobs on a dial, if you will, just to kind of make it easier. But of course, authorities, they're constantly seeding authorities into the realm that you are aware of, and that's where you talked about the algorithm. Okay, so the authorities that speak to the left aren't the authorities that speak to the right, right? But they want to make sure that they kind of own those authorities so they can steer you where you want. Because they know that we're sheep. We look for a leader. We look for somebody with experience. And I mean, quite honestly, in many cases today, like just look at the vaccine, whole COVID thing. Who could really know virology, right? So you had to look to somebody who you trusted, right? So, and then, of course, social pressure is just that herd mentality. Like, if I can't figure it out between my own experience, between an authority, I'm just going to kind of look around and go, where's everybody going? And if 90% of the people are going here, I'm just going to go here, all right? Because, or like yell fire in a movie theater, right? And everybody just moves, and I'm going to move with them. I'm not going to think about it until later, right? It's that whole protective, I'm going to stay with the herd, right? And so those 3 dials, and experience, of course, can be manipulated, right? Bernays wrote about this. Do you understand, or are you familiar with his term of stagecraft? He used the term stagecraft. So, so it's basically making news. Like, I'm going to make the news for you instead of report news. So he had his, the Torches of Freedom campaign that he did for Philip Morris. He had his secretary and a couple of the young ladies march in I think it was Macy's Day Parade. And then to get to a certain point, he had all the reporters there, and they were going to roll up their skirts, take cigarettes out of their garter, and light up what they called, euphemistically termed, torches of freedom. And it was sold as equality with men, right? The women now wanted it because, at that time, you were a bad woman. You were on the dark side if you were smoking, and respectable women did not light up. So, he had been contracted by Philip Morris to sell cigarettes to women. And so this was stagecraft. This was, this is an inorganic, made to look authentic of a clamoring for women to want to smoke, which wasn't actually true, right? There was no one doing that except for him. So that's where experience can be manipulated, right? Because you see that, or it was in the paper, right? It's reported on, and you think, oh, people want to smoke, right? They want to smoke. He also said in that same book, the propaganda book, he said, okay, the politician of tomorrow is no longer going to speak to you about tariffs. Okay. He goes, what's going to happen is the world around you is going to be filled with this lesson, right? So, for example, before the president speaks on it, they're going to have men of prominence go to this important function in, like, if they want to change the wool tariffs, they're going to boycott wool. So they're going to wear cotton suits to this important function. And that's going to get broadcast. It's phony, right? It's made as part of this campaign. Somewhere else, they're going to be reporting, or they're going to do a survey on how, not having affordable wool products is hurting the poor. Okay. And over here, you're going to have some middle-class people, boycotting, wool because of the high prices for their businesses. Okay. So he said, before the leader even speaks on it, these are experiences that people go, oh, this is really real. You know, like seeing is believing with your eyes. Remember that. Seeing is believing, right? Trust your eyes. Okay. Trust the experts and trust what others are doing, right? That's how we're built. And so they hack into that system, right? It's not facts and reason. So they manipulate experiences around you with PR. Okay. They put the authorities they want you to believe into the system, and then they wrap you around with everybody's doing it. And so you should too. Right. And so those are those main kind of pillars that they're constantly using. And so even your side that you've been trained to know and love, you know, they're getting through to you through trusts, not lying. You see what I'm saying? It's different, right? It's not like people, well, I can tell a lie. No, they're setting up the trusts for you to believe, and they're getting through both sides, right? Because these trusts are set up over here for the left, and a similar set of them are set over for the right. And so that's what people really have to realize, because facts and reasons have nothing to do with that, right? And being able to no fallacies, no logical fallacies is actually ridiculous. It's no help. I mean, you should be able to think. You know, we want people to be critical thinkers, okay? But that's not going to help you in this world, because you have to understand that those things are manipulated. And then, of course, the top two are language, which they're always, of course, PR people that you frame it anti-abortion or pro-life, right? And so how you label something, how you frame it, they're using language all the time, kind of weaponizing it, maybe using it in a way that we don't think, maybe we mean one thing and they mean another, right? And so there's ways that they can manipulate that. And then the culture, of course, they're always seeding things right into, the movies, the things that are around us, the sitcoms, the things that they're normalizing, so, putting into the schools and socializing. So you have all those things, that I call the infrastructure of belief, that are helping you, decide on any particular given item that comes up in front of you during the day. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
No, absolutely. I think that's a pretty clear explanation of it. In fact, I think it works. I like the idea of the sort of knobs and sort of turning.
I don't know if you can see this. Can you see it?
Pretty well what I was sort of. That's pretty well what I was sort of envisioning. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a way. I can send this to you if you want to put it up in the thing. But it's a simple framework to go. Oh, you know what I mean. And again, parents, we need to be teaching kids this, because it's not getting. You and I lived a significant portion of our life without this phone or without a computer, and the kids are being indoctrinated from this since the time they can hold it and use it, or the parents give it to them. And so they have to understand what's being done, so that they're just sheep following along. And so that's why the first book I created with a study guide, actually, so that parents could sit down with their kids and really go through this. Take 12 lessons, or do some even if you're not homeschooling, you could certainly do this as a extra topic, and then help your kids start to navigate this world. Because it's, even if you understand and you're not being manipulated, how do you teach your kids? It's hard to just say that one's right, that one's not. Well, why? Well, you've got this experience and you don't even know how to actually maybe explain it to them. Why you think this, it's just life experience, but you got to have a way, because these kids are really up against it.
Yeah, it's been, it's an interesting struggle. I have children that range from 14 to 25 now, and so I'm still going through it in some sense, but I've had two of them come out the other side of it, at least that propaganda side of it, through the manipulations of the public school system, and they came out on top of it all, and they went through all the same things, and this sort of social manipulations and these we could go on and on about the weird things that are going on in the schools. My wife was a teacher for a while, and so we have sort of some inside baseball understanding of that system, not just somebody who sat on the outside of it and gone, geez, that thing is really screwed up. No, we've sort of sat on the inside of it and gone, geez, that thing is really, really screwed up.
Yeah, that's a good seat to have, right? Because you can really get the actual perspective of.
Well, and it's the bottom of but not the bottom of the barrel, but it's the baseline, right? It's where it's all starting, and you watch them manipulating it and pushing it back further and further, and the children are younger, and they're giving more reason through the manipulations of the economy and through the social manipulations to get women to go into jobs and leave the kids, and it's just. It's everywhere. It's that beginning space right there, and it continues through it. I don't know how my children that have gone through it came through it as well as they did, other than just having a not a cynical father, but a father who's paying attention and who is cynical.
Well, you're engaging them, and obviously you were, and you're taking life as it comes and navigating it with them, but a lot of parents, they're not doing a lot of dialogue with their kids, and so in that case, they really are vulnerable, but good for you. You felt like you got them at least half of your crew through.
It's not that hard. Because it really, truly is about the engagement of the adults. I don't want to sit here and tell people that it's easy, because obviously everybody's situation is different. But generally speaking, the average person should be able to raise their children simply by just paying attention to them and talking with them on a fairly regular basis, and just letting them know, even if they go back to the bedroom and lock themselves back there for a couple years or whatever it is during that they know that you're still out there, and that if they need something, they can come to you, and to show up for the things when they get interested in something. Show up for it. It doesn't matter what else you have to do. You need to show up for that and show that you support them in their interests and in them finding other things to do. And you don't be judgmental about it. You tell them when they've done something right or wrong, but those should be pretty simple, because you've been telling them that since they're a child. Keep your hands to yourself. Keep your hands off of other people's stuff, and we'll be fine. It seemed simple, but I did it. And I'm one of those, sort of unparenting types. I've not put effort into parenting my children. I let my children grow up, and they're very smart, they're very intelligent, they're very respectful of other people and ideas, and they're doing their thing, they're not out there creating a bigger burden, and there's those people are everywhere. They just are not capable, and they give up real easy, and a lot of it has to do with the way they're told through the media and through the social media and through the movies, and that they're not good enough if they're not doing things sort of a certain way, or things aren't going their way by a certain period of time, or if you make the most minimal effort, you should have this great reward. They don't talk about the hard part, the work, what it takes to accomplish things, and what it means to feel good about those things. Obviously that stuff is out there, but generally speaking, most of what people are bombarded with is just vapid, useless information.
Yeah.
I don't know where we go from there. That's is that the third book?
No. Well, yeah. No, actually, I mean, like, we have to rebuild the walnut, right? And the walnut is what I call local culture, the influences of local culture. Because if in most cases, you don't really have any local leadership anymore. Forget the politicians. You know what I mean? They're in it for, grift or whatever, their own power thing. And they're being, it takes financially a ton of money. So they're supported by the, big business, in other words. And, so it doesn't really have anything to do with we the people in the sense. So, but, so who do we have locally anymore that you actually look up to? And so there isn't any local leadership for the most part, unless you're, in a church maybe, or some other organization, or extended family's gone, right? And it's hard work. Like you just said, it's hard work. These things, that gives us resilience to what everybody's saying outside. Like if you want to buck the system, right? If you say, well, I'm not going with this big stream over here, it takes a different type of person, and you got to have some sort of other community around that human being who's going to buck the system to help support them, right? And but we've lost it. We don't have civil society anymore, right? In many cases, it's really gone in local communities.
It's an interesting thing because it's there, but it's not, because it's my argument that what we have in spite of all of the manipulations of government, that everything that's good about America, that's good about the world, that's good about capitalism and our individual cities and communities is in spite of the theft and the lies and the manipulations and the murders and everything that comes with government, just the total control over it. So while it's absolutely breaking down if you let it get to you, the fact is that the only way it is working is down here on the ground between us as individuals, and so that's what we have to salvage, right? Is to be able to continue to make that work. We cannot let them continue to drive the wedges between us, particularly the political wedge, because the political wedge is ridiculous. It's a silly little thing that means nothing. Again, you just said it. It's that politics, and politicking, it has nothing to do with taking care of community and taking care of your neighbors. That's what we have to do ourselves down here on the ground, and we've done a really good job of it. It's slipped a little bit more in the last few years, but then again it hasn't, because I think it's also reflected in the fact that we're seeing this sort of crime is at sort of historic lows, really. And so that tells me that even while we're still struggling to get along out here in spite of this, that we're finding other ways to get along out here. We're making it, because with the collapsing economy, with this slow train wreck of an economy that's happening all around the world, certainly with the dollar, as it's happening, we're finding ways to mitigate, and it should be worse, right? It should be much worse than it is. Things should be, I think, much worse than they are, given how bad it is if you look at the individuals. So I think we're still fighting for ourselves and for our communities, but I don't know for how much longer or if it's sustainable.
Yeah, well, I personally think, unfortunately, I think it's going to get a lot worse.
Yeah. No, I think it has to.
It's going to get better. And we haven't really been tested yet.
No.
I don't think. Marginally, it's things have stayed, decently okay for us. But the leveraging is going to get really more severe.
And that's what I see is the slip, right? It's slipping away from us. But the thing about it is we can't stop eating. We can't stop taking care of ourselves, doing the things that we do day to day. So will what we see, I always love the line, even though I don't like to compare movies to real life necessarily, but the Star Wars line, when Princess Leia says to Tarkin, the tighter you squeeze your grip, the more galaxies or more systems will slip through your fingers, right? That's what I see. That's the hope that I have, is that as they continue to squeeze, they just push more and more of us out away from what they're squeezing. We just get away. We just walk. That's the squeeze. Well, I don't want to be squeezed. I'm just going to go over here where there's no squeeze anymore.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Where is there going to be?
Tough, right?
When you look at the power structure, like this, I have another. Little illustration. I love little illustrations. I think it helps people. But I just call it the Monopoly tree, right? I don't know if you can see that. And there's things that are just the power structure, the monopolization of, the resources, the public utilities, the banking system, the idea syndicate that I call the universities at this point, right? The funding, the public-private partnership, it's all spitting out whatever the money wants. Okay. I say we have the best ideas money can buy, which isn't very good, right? I mean, they're buying whatever they want in the system. And so you have like an idea syndicate, you have idea bullying, right? Because the more money you have, we have this violent aggregate of money that if have you ever read Giants by, oh God, the last name's Phillips, I think. He's a Sonoma State university professor, but he basically goes over like everybody in the world has public relations departments. You know what I mean? Like the Army has it, and all the government agencies and all the big companies and all the NGOs and the nonprofit organizations, and I mean literally everybody but us, selling their message into this, the ether, right? And so astronomical amount of money, and so when you take the Jenga blocks, when you start to take the Jenga blocks out from the bottom, you know what I'm talking about, that game? Okay, it's all structured, it's all built around, these big monopoly blocks. You see what I'm saying? And it's like, okay, you can go a different way. I mean, this is the reality. My motto for the year is true hope begins when illusions end. Okay. And it's really important. Like a friend of mine, he was really enamored with the crash in the Andes, that airplane that crashed in 1972. And those people had patched together the radio, made it work, and they were listening online when they heard the words, "The search has been called off." Okay, which would be the worst thing that you would want to ever hear, right? Okay, that's unplugging all the illusions that you're just going to get saved. Somebody's going to bring a helicopter down and you're out of there. Okay, but it's probably saved their life to hear the worst, because now they go, oh my God, it's just us. And they have to do something. Well, they ended up doing cannibalism, right? But they ended up getting out. They walked out and got to some post or something like that. But, the idea is that, you got all these illusions that this is going to save you, or this is going to come through, or that's going to, you have to really face the facts. And it's tough. And that's why I'm saying this monopoly, this structure is all built on top of each other. You know what I mean? The dollar system, all the pensions, and you know what I mean? If you want to divorce yourself a little bit from the system, it's not happening with the system maintaining its integrity. And so it's collapsing, whether we collapse it first or they collapse it.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's all just sort of a race to the bottom, unfortunately, and that's all you can do is just sort of arm yourself with the information and the tools to know when the worst of it is coming. Because there's no real way to know. That's the truth of it. Is that there's nothing you can do. No bit of one piece of information that's going to solve it or protect you from any of it. It's a greater knowledge and understanding, and hopefully, getting along with individual communities. And there's so much more. And unfortunately, we're out of time. That hour is gone. We burned that bad boy. We may have to do it again. We'll just continue at part 2 sometime. Really great getting to chat with you. I do wish that we did have more time, but
like I say, I got book 2 coming out. I got book 2 coming out shortly. Yeah. So when that's out, we can, maybe you can take a look at that book, and say, okay, let's chat about that.
Well, and then maybe I can get a read in on the first one before we get there, and maybe I'll have some thoughts for you. No, I imagine. Listen, just chatting with you, I think that it's amazing what you're doing, and I hope that it really works out, and I hope you continue to get everything in line so that you can drop the books, the rest of the books, and get the information out there, because I think you're on a path. There's so many different angles, right, that we can try to approach this thing from. We can talk about how bad this is, or how different that thing is, or what it could be if we were going to do this. But breaking through the propaganda is one of those core things. It's like the understanding.
Yeah, it is, because the blinders really come off. So like my second book is really pulling on the strings of like, who is using these selling arts that rise up in the 1800s? Who's using them and for what reason? And all I'm doing is getting historical people, books, none of this is, it's on the record, right? And we don't know the history, because nobody's, people think, first of all, they think American propaganda is an oxymoron, for most of the time, from the World War II, right? The enemies did it, we didn't. Okay, but that's absolutely not true. And so, taking it back so that we can see its rise in our country, and our eyes start to be open, because we're historically educated, which I wasn't either. So I mean, the schools isn't meant to give us that,
So all have to start somewhere. Michelle Stiles, thank you so much. SmartSheep.com. That's where you find out more about Michelle, and the rest of you. We will catch up with you next time.
Okay. Thanks. We'll see you, Mike.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy.